Peace and love, peace and love, peace and love. Hey everyone, this is Sister Naira. I am here tonight with the Heal on Purpose podcast. So excited to be present and before you all tonight with a beautiful, beautiful podcast that is going to awaken our consciousness as it relates to mental health on a deeper and more profound level. As you come in, I'm going to ask that you please take a moment and share this podcast so that we may get this word out far and wide. Sister Naira, as your transformational life coach and your host for tonight with the Heal on Purpose podcast, presented to you by Repair of the Black Family, we are interested in helping you to eradicate generational trauma, generational drama, limiting beliefs, and self-sabotaging behavior pattern. And we provide alternative solutions to mental health. And tonight, when I tell you we have solutions, we have some solutions. And so my guest tonight, I'm just really excited because we're going to be highlighting this hold on one second. We're going to be revealing the little known driving force behind racism and what you can do about it. And so I am not going to sit before you long. I'm about to bring my guest in. And if you've been vibing with me for a while, you know to drop them yellow hearts, right? Go ahead and drop some yellow hearts so that I know that you are here with me. And so I'm not going to hold off any longer. I'm going to bring in my beautiful guest tonight, one that's been on the battlefield for a very long time. Her name is Miss Anne. And I think she is coming right on right now. Miss Anne Goedeke. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited to have you here tonight with this very powerful, needed, and wanted and timely subject matter. And as we get ready to have this discussion, I want to do the proper due to introduce you to my guest. And that is Miss Anne Goedeke is the executive director of the National Affairs Office for the Citizens Commission of Human Rights, CCHR, in Washington, D.C., a nonprofit mental health watchdog organization dedicated to eradicating, that's like my favorite word, Ms. Anne, eradicating abuse and restoring human rights to the field of mental health. She has been protecting people from abuse in the mental health system for the past 20 years. Tonight, she will be revealing the little known driving force behind so-called scientific racism in America for more than 200 years, right up to today. She will also talk about common sense approaches parents can take to help protect and maintain their children's mental health. This is powerful knowledge for people to have to protect themselves and their families. Welcome, Miss Anne. You are doing the right thing at the right time and helping your Sister Naira, and Brother David repair the Black family with this message of truth. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So, Miss Anne, before we get started, what really caught my attention when I got your email, it was a quote. And I have to share this quote with my audience. And I just want to know, why this particular quote? It says, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Good God.
We're going to be going through a little bit of history, and it's not a good history. Mm-hmm. But if you understand that history, then we don't have to do it again.
That's right. Yes. And in the Nation of Islam, we say history best rewards the researcher. So historical facts is absolutely, I feel like, and I know we have to go to the past to be able to be right here in the present and create a new reality for our future. So I feel like that's a perfect quote for what we're about to discuss tonight. And before we get into this much needed and wanted topic of revealing the little known driving force behind racism, and what we can possibly do about it. I just want to know, like, what got you into this?
I had personal experience with the mental health system uh, that my family members had gotten involved with. For example, I had two nephews, two different sisters. Their sons were told to be put on ADHD drugs. And what it really was they were not getting sufficient educational support. And I started to see how rampant and how easy this diagnosing people with mental health disorders and then sliding them right into psychiatric drugs was. And I did research, and I have a lot of experience with families who've gone through it. And we need to put an end to all of the false information that is out there that people are operating on when they're trying to do the right thing for their own mental health and the mental health of their families.
Absolutely. Wow, that's powerful. And I can relate to your story, not to the degree. Yeah, I can relate to your story in many facets. But what drives me as it relates to mental health, I think back to my beloved father. Now, mind you, it's always been around me, but I wasn't aware of what people go through emotionally that affects their mental health. If they don't have the proper knowledge and they don't have the proper resources, they become subjected to a system in the need of seeking help. And that help, that so-called help, actually further destroy and create more problems. And that's what I found with my father. He passed away in 2001. And as I've grown more mature and I look back over the times of his life and the times with him, he was suffering with mental health, but he also was heavily medicated. He was on the Xanax. I remember these names as I was a little girl and coming up. He was on the Zoloft. He was on all of these different things. And many of my family members are on these different drugs. And so for me to be exposed to this type of awareness and seeing what I've gone through, I'm very passionate about raising awareness so that we can save the next generation, if that makes sense. And
Yes.
so I just want to thank you so much for being courageous. I don't know how long have you been doing this?
20 years.
20 years. Come on. You've been on the battlefield for 20 years. I want to thank you so much for being courageous. And I've had I don't, Reverend Fred Shaw, I've had him on. He's talked about this, but we're going to come from a different angle tonight. And I just believe that this is a subject title you can never raise awareness enough as it relates to this. And so to my listening audience, as you come in, I'm going to ask that you get a pen and a piece of paper. I'm going to ask that you take notes and also ask us questions. We want you to share this message, to share the messages to save a life, because we're in the business of saving lives. So with that being said, Miss Anne, I want to know, we're talking about scientific racism. What is scientific racism?
Scientific racism refers to the use of false science, quack science, pseudoscience to supposedly justify racial inequality and discrimination.
Wow. Now, before I get into, because I got my questions, but you said we're gonna go through the historical. Let's do that first, right? And thank you for that, because I think that's very important for us to know. But tell me the historical information that you have about this.
Well, it started way back in the late 1700s, was the first example of scientific racism that I know of. And that was Dr. Benjamin Rush, who is considered the father of American psychiatry. And he himself was a slave owner. And he came up with a disease that supposedly caused Black skin. And he called that disease negritude or negritude. I've heard it pronounced both ways. And the solution was scrubbing the skin until it was white.
What you say? And wait, say his name again, and I'm gonna need my listening audience to drop that in the chat. What was his name again?
Benjamin Rush, the father of American psychiatry. And what you will see, this history has to do with psychiatrists and psychologists and their promotion and perpetuation of scientific racism. Dr. Benjamin Rush was the first example of this scientific racism because he created this supposedly scientific disease, but we know it isn't. And yet it was used against Blacks.
Wow. Yes, ma'am. That's beautiful. And I want to thank, I see people coming on, and I'm going to ask my engineer to switch the comments to my personal page and not the Repair the Black Family page, because I want to see the comments as they come in as well.
And I do have a little more history for
yes,
you.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So then moving on to the early 1800s, just before the Civil War, we have a psychologist named Samuel Cartwright, who was an apprentice under Benjamin Rush. And he invented a mental illness, and he called it drapetomania. And that's from the Greek words for runaway slave and crazy. And he said that runaway slaves had a mental illness, and the solution was to whip the devil out of them. This is a psychologist. So again, scientific racism, coming up with some kind of a supposed illness, scientific theory that justifies racial discrimination and just horrible acts of brutality.
Wow.
Then the Civil War broke out, but just around that time, there were insane asylums being started in the US. And at the same time, there was the American Psychiatric Association starting. And one of the founders of the American Psychiatric Association believed in these theories and made sure that the insane asylums that were being set up were segregated, so that these psychiatric hospitals were some of the first officially segregated institutions in the United States. And it was the psychiatrists that were doing this. So you'll see the theme as we go through about psychiatrists and psychologists. Then the Civil War broke out, and during that time, 179,000 Black men served in the US Army, 19,000 served in the Navy. And after emancipation, the emancipation freed 4 million Black slaves. These people had suffered tremendous trauma on the battlefield and as slaves. And yet the psychiatrists and psychologists in this country paid little attention to their needs. They were totally neglected and left to deal with this horrendous treatment on their own. And then it goes on. Scientific racism got a big boost from eugenics.
Absolutely. I just want to say this. I'm asking my audience to please just go down this time track with us, because it's going to take us right up to present time. So let's get into it about this eugenics.
Eugenics is a word that came from the Greek word for good stock or good breeding. And this was the brainchild of an English psychologist, Francis Galton, who came up with the idea of racial purification. Wow. And that's what eugenics is. If you've heard that word, it's separating races to get racial purity, and also to keep undesirable races from having children. And that is done through sterilization and birth control. And in many cases, forced. The sterilization was certainly forced. This idea of eugenics, this idea of racial purification spread worldwide from this psychologist, and it led to the Nazis' extermination of millions of people during the Holocaust, to South Africa's apartheid, to the white supremacist activities and terrorism of the Ku Klux Klan, and to Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger's push to have Black women sterilized. She was a eugenicist.
Teach.
All of these had their racial purification ideas come from eugenics, the brainchild of this psychologist. And then it goes on with what the psychiatrists and psychologists did with eugenics. Shall I continue?
Continue. But I just want to say this, Anne, as you're talking, the key word that's coming out is racial purification, and how this theme, I mean, I'm not oblivious to what has happened to Blacks in America, but this is shifting a viewpoint and coming from a different angle. And I just want to thank you. So yes, please, let's continue.
Eugenics got a big boost then from the American mental health movement. That's the psychiatrists and the psychologists. They were in the business of deciding who was desirable and who was undesirable. They are still in that business today. Who is worthy and who isn't worthy, because let's put a label on them. Back then, they pushed to get sterilizations done. Sterilizations were done in many states right up until the 1970s. Involuntary sterilizations of people who were considered unfit by somebody. As an aside, it was also in Nazi Germany, it was the psychiatrists that ended up forcibly sterilizing 400,000 people, and eventually went on to take their own mental patients, psychiatric patients, and deliver them to death or kill them themselves. And this was admitted by the German Psychiatric Association. And I want to say right now that the systemic racism in the United States is being admitted as systemic racism in psychiatry and psychology. This is being admitted by their professional organizations. The American Psychiatric Association and the American Psychological Association have admitted to systemic racism in their practices. And I say, if they say it's so, believe them.
Come on now.
And now this is the history that has led to their admissions of systemic racism going back 2 centuries. So psychologists were also active. More than half of the presidents of the American Psychological Association up to the 1950s also had leadership positions in eugenics organizations. What do you think these psychologists were being taught about African Americans and racism and so on? Psychologists then used this orientation in the development of intelligence tests that were highly culturally biased, but were used by psychologists to prove, quote unquote, that Blacks have inferior intelligence.
Mm.
and could never be educated like whites.
Mm.
And psychologists continued to promote that false scientific theory, false science theory, all the way up through the 1900s, practically to present day. So it's been out there for a very long time. Courses in eugenics were taught at top universities all through the early to mid 1900s. Textbooks were written so that in high school, at one point, half of the textbooks in the around 1950 contained information about eugenics as a legitimate science.
Wow.
So it was being absolutely ingrained into this country that Blacks were inferior, couldn't be educated. It was okay to discriminate. It was okay to sterilize, because experts at top universities and heads of these psychiatric and psychological organizations were saying so. We're promoting it. We're presenting it as legitimate. And so you have the broad public in America being poisoned in their hearts and minds by psychiatrists and psychologists and the effects of their racist thinking and theories.
Poison. Wait a minute. Hold on, Miss Anne. You dropping so many atom bombs. I just gotta let it marinate on me, right? I gotta let it marinate. And then I want it to marinate with my listening audience, right? This information is so vital. It's truly life-giving, because as you gave me this beautiful quote, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Well, it's people like you that's going to make sure, and me, right? In us and we, that's going to make sure that that's not going to happen, because we're going to keep raising awareness. Now, for those of you that's listening, again, I'm going to ask that you share this. I'm going to ask that you ask questions. I'm going to ask that you make comments, because the more you comment, the more you drop your yellow hearts, the more you share, the more we save lives. See, in this time, ignorance is bliss. We cannot turn our heads. We can't be deaf-eared. We have to be willing to be courageous like Miss Anne and get the information and pass it on. So Miss Anne, I just had to take a pause and let the audience feel you and feel me too, because I'm watching these comments. So please continue on, and thank you.
It's not easy to hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy to confront. Mm-hmm. But when you see where this has come from, it opens the door to solutions to prevent it from happening from here on out. I think about just myself. This is not CCHR, just me. Mm-hmm. What would have happened after the Civil War and emancipation if there hadn't been a mental health movement led by psychiatrists and psychologists continuing to ramp up racism and provide supposed scientific theories behind it? Where would we be as a nation? Something to think about.
Definitely. Absolutely. You know, and I'm gonna let you continue on. The teachers of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he teaches us that you can't fathom the depth of Satan, meaning a mindset, and how far this mindset can go to destroy a people. So thank you. This is great awareness. Let's continue on.
Okay. Well, then it spread through popular culture in ways that it wasn't just the textbooks and the teaching in schools and so on. It went right into the popular culture. They had one of the leading psychologists in the early 1900s who was considered the father of IQ testing in the US. His name was Henry Goddard. He went back and forth throughout the whole country doing lantern slide lectures on eugenics and convincing people that the experts said the way to improve our society was to get rid of the unfit, just deal with the unfit differently, and continue sterilization and things like that. So there were people like him actively going places and teaching eugenics. There were state fairs where there were fitter family contests. They were very common, where families, white families, were encouraged to stay healthy so they could have more babies and improve the society, while learning that Blacks and other races should be sterilized or limited in their families. So it was endorsed at these state fairs by all kinds of local groups. It just became the thing that people came to believe. There was a film called The Black Stork.
Ooh, wait, hold on. What's that? Okay, I need my secretaries on this live to write this stuff down. You said The Black Stork,
which ran for years, and it taught people eugenics ideas, and continued this scientific racism, why people should feel okay about racism, that it was a legitimate approach to improving society. I mean, the whole thing is so sick, we just shake our heads and say, how could this have gone on? And yet it kept going on. Even church sermons might teach the ideas of eugenics to promote healthy marriages. Well, you can bet those healthy marriages would not have been interracial. So everybody was getting into the act because it was supposedly scientific. Right up into the 1960s. Here's one of the things that the American Psychological Association just admitted to in its admissions of systemic racism back in 2021. It admitted that psychologists gave explicit assistance to and participated in racial extremist, white nationalist, and neo-Nazi groups. From the 1960s on, we're getting pretty close to present time.
That's right.
And still we have psychologists acting on this. We then have, as late as 1994, a Harvard University psychologist wrote a book called The Bell Curve.
Okay, hold on. What's the name of the book?
The Bell Curve. And it claimed that Blacks have lower IQs. This is a Harvard professor. That book got a ton of attention. Again, supposedly a scientific basis for considering Blacks less intelligent, less able to learn, and so on. And then one noted psychologist, Arthur Jensen, continued to push the idea of Black inferiority until 2012. 2012, he was still promoting it. So
that's not even too far away.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
Wow.
So this push by psychiatrists and psychologists throughout our country with supposed scientific theories or supposed proof of Black inferiority just poisoned us as a country. Then continuing on.
This is weapons of mass destructions. You dropping bombs. So yeah, let's continue on.
The next part, I'm going to keep really light because it is gruesome.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the extent to which, especially in the 1940s and 1950s, but actually was found to continue as late as the 1970s, Blacks were used in barbaric experiments. They were given psychosurgery, which is cutting into the brain implants to see if behavior could be changed that way. And they were given experimental drugs, including psychedelic drugs at high doses to study what happens to people. It goes on and on. I don't want to give any more specifics about it because it is so unbelievable. What's even more unbelievable is that some of these experiments were done at the National Institute of Mental Health, which is the country's top psychiatric research institution.
Can you, and is that the one in New York?
I'm trying to think. I think it has different locations,
Okay,
a number of
yes.
different, but I think it's headquartered in Maryland, if I remember right. I'm
okay.
not sure of that.
Yes,
but
ma'am.
Different facilities.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. That's beautiful. And can you give the name of that one again, please?
National Institute of Mental Health.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then in the 1960s, another unbelievable thing, psychiatrists invented a mental illness, especially for Blacks. They called it protest psychosis, that was supposed to portray Blacks who were participating in the civil rights movement as violent, dangerous, and psychotic.
Woo! Wait a minute, Sister Anne. You got to repeat that one more time. Say that part one more time.
The psychiatrists came up with a new diagnosis, protest psychosis, that could be used against Blacks participating in the civil rights movement to portray them as violent and psychotic.
So let me just make this very plain for my listening audience. If you are fighting for freedom or participating in that which is going to facilitate freedom, fighting for justice and equality, now you're labeled as violent. You're standing up for your own civil rights. Now you are labeled as psychotic. Okay, I just want to make sure we got this, Sister Anne. This is very powerful. And that, as you continue on, there is a question that I definitely want to ask. Was the Tuskegee experiment a part of this? That's from one of the listening audience.
That was a little different. That was a straight medical experimentation. To my knowledge, it wasn't psychiatric experimentation.
Okay, good. So
at least the popularly known one was.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, good.
Tuskegee Airmen. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. And then at the same time that this protest psychosis diagnosis was invented, as were all of the psychiatric diagnoses, they were all invented and made up and voted on. At the same time they invented that one in the 1960s, there were advertisements in psychiatric journals to sell antipsychotic drugs that would then be prescribed to Black psychiatric patients. And those advertisements had images of angry Black men and African tribal symbols.
Wow. Wow. Yes, ma'am.
Now I'm up to today.
Go up to today. And this is 2023. Let's go.
Today, African Americans, I'm going to take a look at my statistics here,
Yes,
are
ma'am.
still disproportionately given diagnoses related to disruptive, defiant, and psychotic behavior. Disproportionately diagnosed with diagnoses related to disruptive, defiant, and psychotic behavior, such as ADHD, schizophrenia, and oppositional defiant disorder.
Mm. Mm, mm, mm,
Blacks are disproportionately committed to psychiatric facilities. They are disproportionately prescribed antipsychotic drugs and at higher doses.
mm.
African Americans comprise about a little over 13% of the US population, 13%, but they account for over 33% of individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia or psychotic disorders. They're about 13% of the population, but they account for 21% of those diagnosed with ADHD, way beyond their proportion in the US population. African American children are disproportionately diagnosed with ADHD, conduct disorder, and oppositional defiant disorder. 4 of every 10 Black children under the age of 18 has been diagnosed with ADHD. Now, remember, the American Psychiatric Association and the American Psychological Association have admitted to systemic racism. Do we think we're seeing it in these figures?
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to just let my listening audience know the power of knowledge. Because once you know a thing, that's half the battle. The more you know, the more able we are to take action. And that's what this podcast is tonight, is to raise the awareness so that we can be able to take action right in your own family. So again, I just want to say we doing something. Solutions tonight.
And also, so people are not caught unaware.
Yes, ma'am.
Because if people don't know the whole story, then they're going to believe when a teacher tells them your child has ADHD, I need to take them for an evaluation. You take them for an evaluation, and the person doing the evaluating, the psychologist or the psychiatrist, sees the report from the teacher and maybe a survey, which is just opinions about the child's behavior, and says, okay, that's ADHD. Here's the prescription.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Powerful.
So we need to know how it works.
That's
and,
right.
and what it comes from historically, to not be caught up in it ourselves.
That's right. That's right.
So these diagnoses, I touched on this lightly. There's no science to them. There's no science. It's all subjective. Real medicine diagnoses have lab tests or x-rays or something objective that you can look at and see that you have an illness. And then there's a drug that addresses the specific cause of that illness. And then you take another test or x-ray or whatever it is, and you find out that you're better, and it's objective. And one doctor will find the same thing that another doctor will find because it's based on science.
Mm-hmm.
In psychiatry, these psychiatric diagnoses, which are also used by psychologists, It's just opinion
Mhm.
about behavior. And behavior is not an illness. The psychiatrists and psychologists do not know the basis of any of these so-called diagnoses, because there aren't any. There's nothing to point to. So what the heck are they drugging?
Ooh, wait a minute, Sister Ann. Let that marinate. The point that I want to highlight is behavior is not an illness. So what the heck are they looking at? Okay, yes, indeed. Wow. Okay, good.
So they are drugging to change behavior that someone doesn't like. As our co-founder, who was a psychiatrist, but was totally against modern psychiatry, what he said is that this drugging, the diagnoses, telling people they have a mental illness and have to take a drug, is social control. Nothing
Ooh.
but social control. It does not help the person come to grips with what's causing their depression, their anxiety, their inability to sit still, whatever it is. It just maybe tamps it down and makes them more manageable for other people.
Mm. Lord have mercy. Social control.
Social control.
So, in other words, as I'm listening to you, it goes right back to we have to learn how to manage our emotions and um, have strategies and formulas and disciplines. And this is why I love the teachers of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, because we have a classroom that teaches us, how to be. Right. And that's what we need as a people, as a culture, as a community. We need to know how to be, and yeah, everything starts at home and spread abroad. And this is where the mothers are so key. The more the mothers can be able to have this level of knowledge and awareness and understanding, the more we can begin to rear our children to the degree that we are not victims to this type of process. So again, thank you so much for that
And
part.
parents with their children, well, even for themselves, have to be a little bit of detectives, because
Mm.
you've got to find out what it is. It could be anything under the sun. A child that can't sit still, somebody will so quickly have a rush to judgment and slap that ADHD label on. And by the way, those labels are harmful to children, because now they think something's wrong with them that
Mm-hmm.
they can't control except to take a drug. And what are we teaching them? When you have problems, take a drug.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Absolutely. We're in a pill popping society right now,
It's
right?
crazy.
Everything is about taking a pill. Everything. Take a pill for this, take a pill for that, take a pill. So absolutely, I totally agree with you on that.
And then once you're taking one of these psychiatric drugs, they have all of these side effects, some of which are very, very dangerous. They include suicidal behavior, violence, mania,
Mm.
psychosis. I mean, it can get very extreme, because these drugs can have different effects on different people. Do you know how these drugs work?
Tell me about it. Tell us.
Psychiatric drugs? Well,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know how they work, I'll tell you, neither do the drug companies. It says so right in their drug information. It is not known how this drug works. They have theories about the brain, especially chemical imbalances in the brain. And if you've ever heard somebody say, well, you have to take an ADHD drug or you have to take an antidepressant because you have a chemical imbalance in the brain, that is not true. It has never, ever been proven. And they have spent decades researching the brain. That Thomas Insall, who was a former director of the National Institute of Mental Health, he spent $20 billion during his 13 years of running the National Institute of Mental Health, looking for brain abnormalities that could be causing mental disorders. And he didn't find anything.
Wow.
Don't ever let anyone tell you that you or your child or someone you know has a chemical imbalance of the brain. And the easiest way to respond to it is say, prove it, because they can't.
Powerful. And I'm going to remind my listening audience to get more information like this, that they can go to cchr.org. I know that there's some very powerful films on there. And I definitely want to make sure that we can continue our studies as it relates to the information that you're giving us.
I want to talk about, there's a lot of research. Now, this has been really terrible up until now, but things are turning around now because there are more and more psychiatrists and psychologists willing to do research about the harms and ineffectiveness of these psychiatric drugs. And that's what they're finding, that these psychiatric drugs are largely, if not entirely, ineffective. And they have way more harmful side effects to them, harmful effects from them, than was even known before. And now we have the science. This is science. This is true scientific research proving this. And we, every week, I put out a press release on one of these studies, research studies, and put it in, regular layman's language that talks about the problem with these drugs. So you can go to our website, which is cchrnational.org, and look at some of these articles that are on there that will give you the current science about these drugs. And I have just a couple of the really recent press releases I did on ADHD drugs, because so many kids are on them. The FDA just put another warning on ADHD labels, ADHD drug labels, for warning of misuse, addiction, diversion, that's where you give it to somebody else or sell it to somebody else, and overdose. Warnings about these ADHD drugs that we're putting little kids on. Another study, and that's another study that came out, ADHD drugs double a teen's risk of self-harm.
Suicides going up and up and up, especially in our communities. Absolutely.
Another press release I did on the fact that there's no evidence, this research study found no evidence of long-term benefit to children from ADHD treatment with ADHD drugs. What's the benefit? There's no long-term benefit to it. And then another research study linked ADHD drugs to an increased risk of depression in children. This is just in the last, the last several months. So this research is coming out all the time now, and you can take this research. You can go to our website and print off these articles. If somebody in the school, a teacher or a school nurse or a school psychologist is telling you your child has ADHD, first say, prove it, and then hand them copies of these press releases about these scientific studies. They may not know them. They may not be reading the medical journals that these studies are appearing in.
Absolutely.
They need to be educated. Boards of education need to be educated, and we need to stop all of this screening of kids in the schools and evaluating them and sending them for evaluations if they have a meltdown or start crying because they just broke up with a girlfriend or boyfriend. We have to stop doing that. We have to stop these schools becoming psychiatric facilities, which is what they're essentially becoming. Everything becomes all about mental health. Absolutely. And what are they doing? They're labeling kids and drugging them.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. You know, as a mother, as a grandmother, you know, experiencing being approached myself, experiencing my daughter being approached about my grandson who is 2 years old, you know, and this is what brings about that passion to educate, enlighten, be more aware so that we can actually be responsible in making these decisions. I'm not saying that we are against mental health, but we want proper mental health.
That's correct.
You know, so absolutely. And I'm standing right here shoulder to shoulder with you. And it's a bit much to be awakened to, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
It's necessary. It's hard, but it's necessary. So again, yes, let's continue on.
I always have to say that only medical doctors can, and now they're trying to allow psychologists, but that's not usually the case. It's usually still just medical doctors that prescribe these drugs. I'm not a medical doctor, so I cannot tell anyone to take the drugs or not to take the drugs. But what I can do is give you this information so that you can fully understand the pros and cons of what you might be recommended by a doctor or a psychologist or the school nurse, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners. They all are trained in these diagnoses, and that if they think you have a diagnosis, they'll write up something and send you to someone who can prescribe the drugs.
Absolutely.
So this is information for you to think with. And then I also warn that anyone who wants to discontinue a psychiatric drug or even just reduce the dose of it needs to do so under the supervision of a competent physician, because of the potential for very serious withdrawal symptoms.
Very, very key. Absolutely. You know, the proper nutrition is definitely key to healing. You know, as we talk about heal on purpose, and thank you for that advisement of making sure that we get the proper treatment, the proper care as it relates to the foods. And again, with going to a nutritionist and doing these things, you know, there's a beautiful book. I don't have it before me over here, but there's a beautiful book that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad wrote, is how to eat to live. And I believe that we can solve all ills in our communities, especially in our family, with learning the proper nutrition. Because most times that's what it is, just knowing what to eat and what not to eat, especially when it comes to these children.
That's right. Well, that's a beautiful segue to what I wanted to talk about next, because now we're getting to the what you can do about it, and you'll like what you can do about it.
Yes. That's that book right there. And we have that book on our website. Thank you.
The same as there are all of these studies showing that psychiatric drugs are ineffective and harmful, there are a lot of research studies now appearing in the medical journals showing that the common sense things that we used to do before psychiatric drugs are effective, and in many cases, highly effective. And so I want to list out a couple of those.
Absolutely.
These are things you can do. Things you can do
Okay.
for yourself and your kids.
Come on, family. This is for the audience. Things that you can do.
One of the most important, proven by science, is social connections. Having contact with friends and family, good contact. There may be friends and family you wouldn't have good contact with.
Right.
But those people that you can have good times with, good communication with, good support from are absolutely critical. We have always known that. And right now, one of the people who is really beating the drum on this to make sure people are aware of the importance of social connections is the US Surgeon General. He says, and other studies have shown, that the reason there were mental health issues during the pandemic and kids who were getting depressed, well, people who were getting depressed and anxious, was because they were cut off from their social connections during the lockdowns.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So social connections for teenagers and younger and younger kids all the time means get them off those devices. That doesn't count.
I know that's right.
It needs to be in person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, yes, I agree. Y'all write these down. These are the solutions.
Okay. The next one, believe it or not, is exercise.
Beautiful.
It turns out that exercise is highly effective in preventing depression and anxiety and in treating depression and anxiety. If you're already feeling depressed and anxious, exercise. And the amount of exercise isn't that much. You don't have to do strenuous exercise down at the gym for 2 hours a day. You can do moderate exercise like going for walks regularly, and it is effective against depression and anxiety according to the research studies. And one study said that exercise beats antidepressants or psychotherapy for depression.
Wow.
And there are now doctors as well as some medical authorities saying that the first line treatment, the first thing you should do if somebody gets depressed, is recommend they start exercising. And that's coming from doctors.
Absolutely. I agree. Yes.
And
Ma'am.
it's especially effective for kids. So the sports programs are so good for kids because it's not only the exercise, but the social interactions.
That's right. That's right. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Beautiful.
The next one you've already touched upon, and that's diet, proper nutrition.
Absolutely.
So away from the sugary beverages and all the high carb snacks and proper nutrition. And I think probably most people have an idea of what it is. You just need to do it.
Discipline.
Yep.
It's the discipline and consistency in the discipline.
Do you know, I was somewhere the other day that had a bunch of, they looked like they were about 6 years old, just bouncing off the walls. Well, in the next room from where I was a birthday party with cake and ice cream and who knows what. And you know what that does to kids.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. As a mom and a nana. Yes, I do.
The next thing is sleep. And there are two different things about sleep. One is getting enough sleep, and that applies to everyone. Get those teenagers off those devices late at night. Tell them to stop texting and all the other social media stuff they do and get some sleep. Same thing for adults. Adults may be working a couple of jobs, may be stressed out over family finances. You've got to do your best to get a good night's sleep, because if you don't, then things like depression and anxiety may result more easily. So the
Beautiful.
first thing is getting enough sleep. And the second thing is for kids, and this is research. This is all research. This is not me or even CCHR. This is research. The other thing is research shows that children have far fewer behavioral problems if they have a regular bedtime.
That's right.
And they stick with it. It's 8:30, 9 o'clock, whatever it is, it's bedtime.
I understand that. Yes, ma'am. Listen, Sister Anne, I raised 5 children in my household, and I was a very young mother. And by the third child, I knew that a routine was necessary, not just for them, but for me too. So come 8 o'clock, they was bathed, they was fed, and they was in the bed, lights off. And I'm telling you, it gave me peace of mind, and it gave them peace of mind, because they was much happier children. They didn't have to listen to me yelling at them. Oh God. Yes, ma'am, but I agree.
And the last thing I want to mention, and again, this is research, there are far fewer behavioral and emotional problems, depression, anxiety, the whole bunch, from attending religious services.
Come on now. Put on the full armor of God. Yes, indeed.
That's the science. That's the science.
Yes, indeed. I listen. Everything that we have discussed, it takes us right back to the root. Being connected to the Father, the Creator. Being in your houses of worship. That alone can eliminate and eradicate those sad feelings. Being connected. So yes, absolutely.
Good. Yeah, that's what it's all about. I'm older than probably most of the people listening to you, and this is what people did back when I was young, and we didn't have all this depression, anxiety, shootings, kids committing suicide. We didn't have that because we didn't have these drugs. And these drugs have been linked to those things. These school shooters, the vast majority of them, especially if you can get a hold of the records, the medical records, or information about the medical records, they have been taking these drugs, or they're in withdrawal from them and experiencing withdrawal effects. Absolutely. It's just scary when there are so many common sense things to be done.
And
now,
go ahead.
CCHR always recommends a complete physical with lab tests, nutritional and allergy screening. Kids, like I think I may have said, they may be bouncing off the wall. They may have a milk allergy or a wheat allergy or something like that. They may have struck their heads and have a head injury, things that would be found out with a proper medical examination by a competent physician. Looking for physical causes of mental symptoms before you jump to the decision it must be a psychiatric disorder.
Absolutely.
Also, medications can cause people to act strangely. So a review of people's medications should be part of that visit to the doctor. Then for kids, a really, really important one is educational support, making sure those children have proper educational support, whether they are behind in their studies or whether they're bored because they're not being challenged. And that's my personal experience, they will act out and do pretty crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are problems in school that you are hearing about and they want them evaluated by the school psychologist, you can first say, what's going on school-wise? Is he keeping up with the schoolwork? What help is he being given? When your child is doing homework, take a look at how are they doing? Do they understand it? Do they need help? Can you give them help? But these schools now so quickly want to give a child some sort of a mental disability. The school districts get money by doing that, but your child is the one that may pay the price because now somebody thinks that that child should be on a drug.
Wow.
So staying on top of, are they doing okay in school? Do they need help? Do they need more of a challenge? Is so, so important.
Absolutely.
So, again, sort of wrapping it up from my end.
I get it. I get it. I mean, you've given us more armor to put in the armor of God. And as you was speaking, I heard the voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Once I heard him say, you have to know how to maneuver through the minefield.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing here. Like,
Yes.
we're maneuvering through these different mindsets that's out here, some that's for us and some that's not. And the way that you can maneuver through a minefield without getting blown up is you got to know where the traps are. Right? Right, so that you can actually go in and deactivate the bombs that are like purposely set there to blow us up, right? And so for me, understanding that this mental health is like a social button in the Black community. Like it's just thrown around. It is so loosely, and it's almost like made over, right? When it comes to getting, and I'm all for therapy. I'm just not into drug therapy. Makes sense. So when it comes to going to therapy and doing these things that's setting us up for these types of traps, we just have to be armed with the knowledge to understand what to do and how to do it. And we got to get back to old fashioned knowing somebody that you could trust and go talk to them. And when somebody come talk to us, we got to be willing to listen. And that's an art. We got to learn how to listen and not have so much to say, not have so much to tell people what's wrong with them. Just let people talk. We got to get back into talking to somebody in your family, in your church, in your mosque, in your community. What happened to the uncle next door that could sit and talk? So we have to just get back to these things and apply these basic common sense, highly effective tools, solutions that you have given us. And through it all, we got to have some love.
I was just going to say,
look, we got to have some love, because love can endure all things. Getting back to that old fashioned, not just I'm going to pray for you, I'm going to come pray with you. Right?
Caring about people. And I want to just say one more thing about that communication. You expressed it so beautifully. Mm-hmm. But especially with children, you have to have open communication with your children. They need to be able to come to you and talk to you about whatever emotionally is going on with them. Because if they don't talk to you and end up talking to the school nurse, their teacher, the school psychologist, then it's sort of out of your hands already to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. You want to stay on top of your children's mental health and make sure that they are mentally healthy. They have good mental health. And when they don't, you step in and understand it and do what you can to help solve it and help that child solve their problem.
That's right. And that's power. It's power and solution. And with that being said, Miss Ann, I want to thank you. And as we are wrapping this up, I have um, a, a call to action as it relates to this particular broadcast. Right now, I started my own group. I'm the founder of Mothers Against Mental Health Abuse. It's a part of the task force. Um, and I just want to say that we have, I think it's about, oh gosh, don't make me misquote the number. I think it's about 10 of us. It's about 10 of us that's in this group. We're studying, we're learning all what you're bringing to us. And I got to thank Fred Shaw for helping us to develop that, as well as Larry, helping us to develop that. But we are one of the ones that have decided that we're going to stand up and we're going to bring this information and help to stabilize the families with knowing exactly what to do. And we're opening up the doors. We're calling for more help because we know 10 women can't do it alone. It's a movement, Mothers Against Mental Health Abuse. If you are interested in that particular um, uh, army movement, women that's coming together with providing effective solutions, raising awareness, then we are definitely calling upon you to inquire about it and see if it would be a good fit for you. And you can actually email us at healonpurposecoach@gmail.com and just put Mothers Against Mental Health Abuse. healonpurposecoach@gmail.com. And you can learn more about this information in which she shared tonight. You can actually be a part of a movement that we are developing, we have created. And let's just keep saving lives. And Sister Ann, is there anything else what is your closing remarks?
Well, in a way, the way is being led by organizations like CCHR that have been out there talking about these things for decades, since 1969. But now we have authorities also backing us up with the science. So what we need now is boots on the ground.
Okay.
Taking that information and spreading it so that as we turn this society around in a better direction, you are part of it, and can make the country a better place for your family, for your children, grandchildren, and all those who will come after us.
Absolutely. And let me just make sure I got this correct. So Mothers Against Mental Health Abuse, it is a part of the CCHR Task Force Against Racism and Modern Day Eugenics. So we got it tonight. I want to thank you so very much for being courageous. Thank you for transferring knowledge. And that is the key to our success. And as I get ready to wrap up, I'm going to go ahead and do the closing remarks, and then I'll get on the line with you. So he's going to pull you in the back as I get ready to do the closing remarks.
You're very welcome. I'm pleased to have been able to do it.
Absolutely. And again, you said at CCHR National, correct? .org to get those articles.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. And I'm looking forward to doing more work with you, Miss Ann. Sister Ann, we got to continue on. Okay. So right. With that being said, family, I want to thank you so very much for listening to the Heal on Purpose broadcast presented by the Repair of the Black Family. And I just want to leave us with these words that something can be done about it. We're on a battlefield to save lives, and the more information we have, the more data we have, the more we can actually get into action. And with that being said, remember, what is our why? Why Heal on Purpose? Why the Repair of the Black Family, which is to repair humanity? The Repair of the Black Family is interested in eradicating generational trauma, generational drama, generational limiting beliefs, and self-sabotaging behavior patterns. And with this type of programming, we have to unlearn to relearn. And so we are going to continue to bring effective solutions. We're going to continue to bring information to empower us to do the work ourselves. Remember, It's not just knowing about something. You got to show up and do the work. And so every time we come before you, every time we bring something, take what's best for you and apply it in your life. Black minds matter. That's what I'm gonna leave us with. Black minds matter. Okay. And if you want more information, good, go ahead and reach out to us. Last but not least, I just want to make these two beautiful announcements. One, we have our beautiful website, www.repairoftheblackfamily.com. Go ahead and subscribe to our website at www.repairoftheblackfamily. We have our beautiful book, which is Repair of the Black Family Anthology. It has 33 powerful authors with 99 suggested solutions. 33 authors giving their stories, right? Being able to say what has happened in their lives, but also giving lessons learned and 3 repair action. This book is on our website. You also can get it on Amazon, repairoftheblackfamily.com. We also have these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sea moss gummies. I don't know if my husband can put those up, but we have our sea moss gummies on the website. So make sure you go there. And we have the retreat. Sister Naira and Brother David, we have the retreat in Orlando, Florida, 4 days and 3 nights in Orlando, Florida, 5-star retreat. Come on now, we're going to get into the mind work. We're going to focus in on emotional intelligence. We're going to focus in on communication, relationships. Look, we're healing money, relationships, and much, much more. So it's not too late for you to be a part of this beautiful retreat on where you're going to get more tools, more strategies, more formulas to be able to not just help yourself, help your family, help your community, and ultimately help the world. Everything starts with you. Healing on purpose is not a moment, it's a journey. And so if you would like more information about that, go ahead and text us at 727-623-5555. Text the word retreat. It's not too late to come heal on purpose with Sister Naira and Brother David. Remember, we are repairing the Black family. And with that being said, I want to thank you so much for listening. God bless. Peace.